Hi all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Pradeep. In this video, I'm going to explain about a project which I created using Spring Boot, Spring Batch and MySQL DB. So basically we are going to process some flat files. It can be any tokenized file like CSV files or any file which is delimited with pipe or anything. And we will save that into DB. In this case, we will save it into MySQL. So I will explain how I did it so you can also understand how Spring Batch will work. So let's get started, and before that let me run this project so you understand what I am talking about. So here I have one CSV file, address.csv. It has some columns in it: first name, last name, state and zip code, and I want to save this into one of the table, that is address table. So right now there is no data in this table, so I will run this application. Here I have public static void main. I'm going to run that. Here you go. So Spring Boot is started and job executed successfully. So now let's go back to DB and let me refresh it. Now you see there are 3 records. These records are saved from address.csv. So the same way we can also save any CSV. For example, I also have airlines.csv. So I can go back to this application .java and I can change the CSV name and the table name and the columns, and we can run it, and this data will go into and inserted into the airlines table. So this is how this application works. So I am not using any domain class here. Domain in the sense there is no address.java or airlines.java in the application. So I am using a standard generic map class for this. So the same application can be used on any CSV or any flat file, and data can be saved into the DB. Okay, so let's get started. I will start with empty project and then we can develop on top of that. Okay, before starting I wanted to show this checklist. So I created this checklist which has all the tasks which we are going to do to complete this project. So initially we will start with project setup, and then we will create all required components, and then finally we will run our project. So I will go through each of them, and finally at the end of this video we will be having a running application. So let's start with the first section. Here we are going to create a new Spring Boot application. So let's get started. So to create a new Spring Boot, I went to start.spring.io and I selected a Maven with all default versions. I didn't change anything, and I just gave group name, artifact and the name of the project, and I added Spring Batch and MySQL driver. Only these 2 dependencies are needed for this project, and I generated it, downloaded it into my local and opened it in my IntelliJ editor. So let me show you that. So this is a basic project, empty project. It doesn't have anything, so it has just a application startup class, and that's it, with the default application.properties without anything. I will copy the resource file, sample CSV files which I have into resources directory here. Yeah, so I have 2 files, address.csv and airlines.csv. We will try to save them into the database. So after this, make sure you have MySQL installed on your computer and run it, and if you have any editor for that, you can access that DB and create these 2 tables, address and airlines. So this is a simple tables. So let's see what columns we have. For example, for address, just I have first name, last name, state and zip, and for airlines, month, male passengers and female passengers. So we will try to save data into these 2 tables now. So we have everything ready to start our project. And before that, let me open our checklist. So we completed this and we completed our MySQL. So I mean to say we started our MySQL. I already started that, so it is running, so we are done with that. And then let's go to the next part. We will create Spring Batch components. Okay, I'm not going into the details of how Spring Batch works, but I will show you this architecture or the flow, how internally Spring Batch will perform these jobs. So if you see this image here, I am showing Spring documentation for the batch. So this is how the flow, how the application will process, the batch will process the jobs, or in this case the flat files. So we will have three basic components in this, like item reader, item processor, and item writer. So as the name says, right, it's they are the basis of the batch. So each row is processed or the read by this particular component reader, and that particular item is processed by this one, and it is written into some other any source, like any destination, like in this case DB MySQL database, or it can write into any file. So all these three components are controlled by the step. So step contains a reader, processor, or a writer, and this step is passed to a job. So this job is responsible to run this step. So a job can have multiple steps. So it can run a step 1 and then it can run another step, that is step 2. So this job is launched by a job launcher. So it will launch this job. So all these three components will update their status in a job repository. So in this case, a job repository can be, in our case it is a MySQL. So Spring Batch will create some default tables, and these objects here will update their status into the repository or into the tables. So this is the basic overview of how Spring Batch will perform the jobs. Okay, I will go back to the editor and we will start creating our batch components. So I'm going into the batch processor and I will create a new package, and I will call it as a flat file, maybe flat file job. Okay, so within that we can create a new file, new Java file. I will call it as a flat file job configuration. So this class will contain all the needed or required components like reader, writer, job, and step. So because this is a configuration, I will annotate it with configuration, Spring's configuration, and then since it is a batch configuration, so I will also enable it for the batch. So what I'm saying is this particular class will have a Spring Batch job definition. So Spring will understand and it will run this file by default, or it will run this class on startup of the application. So that's what this annotation will do. So we are ready with the class, and we will start with reader. So we will start a item reader, or a reader in this case. This one will return flat file item reader. And as I told you earlier, right, I am not going to use any domain objects in this project. We are using a generic map. So I will use map here, which is a map of string and object. Okay, so let me open the CSV file. So this is a column, right? So the column is the first name. So the first name will have this value of job and oh, it should be John, but okay, so some name, okay, and the last name will have a value of Doe. So when you come back here, so this I'm saying this map of column and value. So this is the first name and this is the first name of the person, and the map contains another object with the last name which contains the value of the real last name from the CSV file. Okay, so this is a reader, right? So I'm just giving the name reader, and this is a bean. Okay, and this will return a flat file item reader. So this is a Spring class. What we are saying is this particular reader is going to read a flat file. It can be any text file, and it will return this object, flat file item reader. Okay, so now before returning this object, we need to create some basic we need to define what this flat file item flat file is. So in our case, it is a CSV file and it is a comma separated, right? So we need to create an object of delimited line tokenizer. So this is a tokenizer we are saying, and we are saying that this is a comma separated here by passing the delimiter. So there can be a pipe separated file also, right? So in this case it is a comma separated. Okay, and along with the delimiter we need to set the names of the columns, right? In this case it is first name and last name, state and zip. Okay, I know this is not a proper approach to have everything coded, the column names coded within our application, because if you want to process some another file, in this case airlines, again we need to change these values and rerun the application, right? That is not the correct approach. But this is, since we are starting this project, right, we will start basically just by giving these values here directly within the object or the component here. Later then we will extract them and we will pass them as a job parameters. So but we are good here. So let's start with basic coding here. So we created a tokenizer. This will tell that we are creating a delimiter. We need a delimiter. We are going to read a comma separated file which contains 4 columns in it. Okay, next we need to define a line mapper. So we created a tokenizer, right? And tokenizer tells Spring Batch that this file has a comma and this is the particular column and what the column name, all those details we gave. But in the mapper we will take the whole line and we will convert this whole line into a record. So if we are using a domain, then it could be a person class. So but in this case we are using a generic, so it is a type of map string object. So this map instance contains, in this case let's say a record, contains this whole line. So we need to create this record, a map of string and object, right? So in order to create that, we will go back to our class. We need to create an instance of default line mapper. It is a type of map string and object. So this mapper this mapper will create a line for us. So to do that, we will first set a line tokenizer. So the line tokenizer will give us the whole column or whole row. So that's why we need to pass the tokenizer to the mapper, and then we need to set a field set mapper. So this will take an instance of field set mapper. So we need to implement this this class, and this class will have a method called map field set. We need to override that, and that method will return instance of map, right? So let me create that. I'm going to create an anonymous class here, so that will be easier to implement. So we have old class. This is the method I'm saying we are going to override, and we are going to create an instance of map. So you see there is an instance, we will get the field set. The field set contains all the key values from that particular row. So that field set contains this whole row. Okay, so let's go back and see what it contains. So if you see, this class contains get values, which returns all the values from that row, and get names will return all the column names of that row. So we use these methods and create the instance of map here. So what I do is I will iterate all the columns. So for that I can use basic Java for loop, or I can use int stream. So this is the easiest way. So I want to iterate this integer stream from 0 to field set dot get field count. So I'm going to iterate through all the columns, right? And I'm going to create instance of a int stream from that. And once the integers are int stream is generated, then I'm going to collect into a map. So collectors dot to map, right? So I need to pass this, I need to get this index, and using this index I need to get the, I can get the column names. So column name is a string, so which contains, which will be available in the get names, right? And this is a string array which contains the column names. And then value, I need to create a value for the map. So again the value will be available in get values. So that is a string array again. So with this we have our map object which contains column and value. So this is the int stream I used here. So once this field set is created, in this case mapper is created, right, then the last object we need to create is flat file item reader, right? This is a type of map string and object. This is the item reader, right? And a couple of things we need to set. First thing is set lines to skip, set lines to skip 0. So in our CSV file we don't have any column here in this file, right? So generally sometimes some files will have a column in the first row. In this case we don't have, so we are saying that there is no need to skip any line. So we have everything, like we need to read all the rows, and we can give some name to this. So I will call flat file reader, and we can also, we need to set a resource like the file name, file path. So in this case it is available in the class path. So I will set a class path resource, and I can call this as I can pass address.csv, right? And finally I need to set a mapper for this. We already created a mapper object there, so I am passing that, and then return item reader. Okay, so with this we created our reader. So there are 3 sections in this, or 3 parts in this. Create a tokenizer which will define the columns, and then create a mapper which will read each line and creates an instance of whatever object we want. In this case we want a map, so this represents a whole row. And then we will create our item reader. So this will take the mapper and what the input file and some other settings. So finally we have our reader here. So we have completed our reader part. We have our reader component. Let's go back to our checklist. So I'm ticking this, created reader. So let's create a writer component, okay, a writer bean. So for writer, we are going to write this record into MySQL. So I first go to application.properties and I will configure MySQL. So you simply need to put these 3 properties. So with this, Spring Boot knows that this is the data source URL and this is the username and this is the password for MySQL. So we created data source, and then we can go back to our configuration class and we can start creating a writer bean, right? Let me collapse this and create a bean. So writer bean, right? So this we are writing into a DB. So Spring Batch provides a class that is JDBC batch item writer. So we need to return this object. So with this will help batch to insert. This object will insert a record into DB or MySQL in this case. So this will return type of map, same like it is the same as what reader does. So it will return the same type. It is a writer. And since this need to return or insert it into the database, so we will inject data source. Spring will insert data source for us by default. Like we no need to declare data source because since we added those properties in the application properties, so data source will be created automatically and that will be injected into this method. So we are going to create a insert query here. Like for example, let me show you how to create this. So we need to create this, we need to pass this insert query, okay, so to this object, so what I do is, so I return a new instance of JDBC item writer builder. So this is the class which will help us to build that object. This is a type of map again, and using this builder we will call this SQL, and I will simply copy this here and put it here, okay. Once we pass this SQL, then we set the data source, okay, and then finally we will call build. But this is not going to work. Why? Because this insert is fine up to this, okay, this string is fine up to here. We passed column names and we are saying insert into this address table, fine, but values are not fine because we just gave a parameters here, right? We are just giving the name of the parameters, but we need to actually inject values for this parameters. So who are going to inject here? In this case we can use the help of item SQL parameter source provider. So that is a helper class. What we need to do is, in order to pass the real or the actual value for these SQL parameters, so we need to set this item SQL parameter source provider. So this takes an instance of this class item SQL parameter source provider, which has a single method which we can override. So in this case, let me create anonymous class here, so that will be easier. So here we got our method which we are going to implement. Simply I'm going to return map SQL parameter source, and we need to give a map. Sorry, in this case we need to give this string object map. So what we are telling is, take each row, because the writer will also get each row, right? Reader will read row and the writer will write that row into the DB. So we are telling that take this row, so this is the map of string objects, right, and convert it into map SQL parameter source. This is a simple utility class Spring Batch will provide. It will just take the map and put it same as is, like we are just using directly map, which contains this in the first key, and it will have the first name as a value, and the second key will have this one last name, and it will have the value of the real last name. So we are just creating that. So when we pass this SQL internally, this particular JDBC batch item writer builder or the writer will use this map and inject the actual column values in this at this place. So we are good in this. So we with this we are good with the SQL, and it will insert a row into the DB. Okay, so let me save this and go back to our checklist, and I will check this. We created our writer, and we need to create step, and then we will create a job, right? So let's go and create a step. So as I said earlier that step will first execute reader and then processor and a writer, but here in this case we don't have processor. That is not needed. We just need a reader and writer in this case, because we are not doing any business logic or applying any business logic and not doing any conversion, so that is not needed. So I can directly go ahead and create first a bean, which is a type of step. So this will take reader and writer. Okay, so in our case it is a flat file item reader, which is a type of map of string and object, and then we need to pass JDBC item writer. So this is also a type of map of string and object, right, writer. So Spring will inject the instances of reader and writer in this case. So in this case reader is within the same class and the writer is also within the same class. So it will Spring will create instance of this, or it will call these methods to create instance of these classes, and that will pass to the step method. So to create an instance of step, right, we need to have a step builder factory. So that factory can be auto wired. In this case I will just use auto wired and public step builder factory. So this factory will help us to create an instance of the step. So I will do the return step builder factory dot, I can use some optional name to this step, and I will create a chunks here. So since we are working on a big files, right, big files, it can be like in this case like we have just 5 or 4 lines, but in the actual applications there can be like hundreds and thousands of records. But what if DB gets crashed at like 100th row or maybe 60th row, then all the previous records will be gone. Again we need to start inserting, right? So instead of that, what we do is we will chunk it. In this case I'm just setting it as a 10. So after every 10 rows batch will execute a commit, so we will not be losing all the previous work. We can continue or resume the job again later wherever we left off, right? So that can be done by calling this method chunk and passing the number of rows we want to commit. In this case I put 10, maybe you can put any other number like 100 or 50, depends on number of records. So we need to set the reader and we need to set a writer, and we can also set processor like this, but in this case we don't have processor, so I'm not setting that. And finally I will build it. So with this we completed our step. So it is simply taking reader writer and creating an instance for us, right? Let's go back to checklist. So this is done, and finally we need to create a job. Okay, so before creating job, we also need to have a job builder factory that will help us to create an instance of job. Okay, so we have now job builder factory here. So I'm creating a bean of type job, right? So I can call this method anything, in this case flat file job, and this will take an instance of step. In this case we have only one step, so I am just giving the passing the step to it. So we can use the job builder factory here, and so this is the name I'm giving, and I am giving some unique number to this job. So for example, we will run this job multiple times, so each time a job is ran, we are trying to set a unique number to that, right? In this case we are incrementing the number, right? So as I said earlier, job, step and the job instance, all these three uses a repository, right? So this job knows all the time that when it ran last time and with what job ID it ran. So next time when we run this job, it will go back to the table and find out what the previous job ID is, and it will increment on top of that. So we will have all the audit details of each and every job in the tables. Okay, so in this case we are just incrementing that number here. We can give any other number if you want, we can customize, but we are not going to do that here. Instead we will just increment the number. So next we will set the listener. So this is optional again, but in this case I want to set. So what this listener is, we can set, we can listen for some life cycles of this job, and we can do some actions. So in this case let me show you how. So we need to pass an instance of job execution listener support. So in this case I will create an anonymous class, job execution listener support, and I will override one method from this. So this is after job method. So there is before job method, there is after job method. So in this case I am going to implement after job method. I just want to listen that event, and I will just check the status of job execution. Get status equal to batch status of, let's let it completed, right? If it is completed, then okay, let's, instead of system.out, let me create an instance of logger here. We have our logger. Just want to log this with info. That's it. So we have our listener here, and then we will set our flow. So we want to execute first we want to execute our step. So we can, I think, yeah, so once we set our flow, then we can complete the creation of the job instance by calling the end and then calling build. So with that, our job instance will be created. So if you want to do something before the job, then there is another method, as I said, before job method. So you can override that and then you can do something in that method. So with this, our job configuration is completed. So let me tick that. So now we are ready to run with the sample files, and let's see how it goes. Okay, sorry, before that we need to do some more settings. So we go to application.properties and we will set this property here. So Spring Batch initialize schema always. So it will create a default Spring Batch related tables if they are not existing in the database. So I think we are ready to start. So I will go back here. So we are having address.csv. So let me start and see how it works. I'm going to batch processor application and running this class. So it's starting. Okay, seems there is some error. Incorrect number of tokens found in record, expected 1 but actually is 4. So it seems this error is occurred in while reading the file. So let's go back. Okay, yeah, I got it. I think this set names is taking an array of strings or array of columns, but I passed as a single string. So that is the issue. So what I can do is I need to pass 4 columns, right? Array of 4 columns. I can do one thing. I can split this string by comma. So this will create an array of strings with 4 values in it. Each value contain a column name there. So we are good here. Let's start again. Good. So job executed successfully. Let's go back to our DB, go to address. Okay, so instead of 4 we got multiple. It seems I ran a couple of times earlier, maybe. Not sure, but what I will do is I will just empty this table and rerun it again. Okay, refresh. Yes, so we have 3 columns. That is expected. Okay, good. So this is what our batch job will do. So it will read each item, write into DB, and we configure this reader and writer by clubbing into a step, and we pass this step into a job, and the Spring Boot will launch this job because we have this annotation here, enable batch processing. So that will do all the running or initializing this job for us. But there is main problem. So but before that, let me check this. There is one problem with this project, right? So if I want to store airlines, then again I need to go back to the configuration and I need to change all this stuff like column names, and I may have this address airlines with a pipe. So but I passed comma, so maybe I need to change that. Maybe I need to change, pass a different file name here, right? I think, yeah, this is hard coded. Again I need to change the column name. So there are a lot of places which I need to change, right? So instead of hard coding our values here, we will make it generic, more generic. So we will bypassing these values to this job using job parameters. Okay, so if we go back to our items, so that is the last thing, run by passing job parameters. So we will create an instance of job parameter and pass that to this job, and dynamically that will take values from the job parameters, and the job will read the file and write into the DB. Okay, so for that I will move this annotation from here into the main application class, and next thing what I do is I will implement command line runner, right? So what this will do is this we will override this. This is the interface which has this method. We will override this method. So once the Spring Boot is up, then this method will be called, right? So in what I do is I need job launcher for that, because I'm going to launch this job once the application is up. Okay, and I want flat file job because this is what I'm going to launch. Okay, so these two dependencies are needed for this. Then I create an instance of job parameters. So the job parameters contains the actual values which I need to pass, right, to the job. So it is a key value. So what is the key? So first I want to pass input file, and what is the value? So in this case I wanted to pass address.csv. And next thing is what is the delimiter? So in this case it is comma. And the next thing is what is the table name, right? In this case it is address. And string, what are the column names then in the table? First name, last name, state and zip. And finally I will end up with by adding time. This is needed because this is Spring Batch will not run any job which already ran earlier. In this case, for example, if you pass these 4 values and you run your application, and these details or these parameters will be saved in a table, Spring Batch related table. And again, if you run with these 4 values, then the Spring Batch will go and check in the tables if the same job is ran earlier, and it finds a job already ran, and then it will not execute this job again. So but in our case we need to run multiple times to test our application. So that's the reason we will hack it by passing a time to it. So every time a job is ran with the same parameter, we can run multiple times then the job with the same parameters, and it will run that. Okay, so we created our job parameters. Now we use our job launcher to run a job. So we want to run a flat file job, right? And we need to pass job parameters to that. So we will do that. So we are saving that. Now a couple of things we need to do in our configuration. We are still using the values. We need to change this, right? So for that, see, now with these values are coming as part of a job parameters, this reader need to get that values, and these values are dynamic, means every time a job is ran, these values can be different. So it is not at application level, it is at the time of the job execution, right? So that is a different scope. So Spring Batch supports a scope called step scope. So we need to set that scope, and we need to pass these job parameters to this method that we can do by using a value. We use Spring expression language. We read job parameters. Within that we want input file name. So this is what the structure to read. a value from job parameters. So this is the input file, right? So this is a way we can get input file from the job parameters. So this is a Spring expression language here we are using, so that will dynamically read the value of this object, because since input file is this object maintains a string array, so we are going and giving this key and it will give the value. That value go into this input file string variable here. So we need input file, and also we need two more things. I already have the copy of the two values, just I will paste here. Sorry, yeah. So what I did is, so I am bringing delimiter and also column names from the job parameters. Okay, so first thing, I will remove this delimiter here. I will use the value which we received, and then I will use, instead of string here, I will use column names, right? So we got column names there, and finally we need to use the actual file name came from the job parameters, so in this case input file. So the same way we need to update writer, so we need to set scope for the writer, and we need to pass these values. So first thing is table name and the next one is column names, right? These two things we need to pass. Now a couple of things we need to change. Here if you see, this is the insert, into and the table name, right? So I will make it as a table name, and then I need to pass column names. I need to set column names here, right? So what I do is I will just concatenate this column names field here, so we are good here. And finally we need to generate this string dynamically, right? So for that, see, observe that this is not just a column names, each column has a colon before that. So but our column names has just a comma separated values, right? Here each column has a colon, so this is what I need to create. So for that I will create a string and I will call it as column values using string, right? Column names dot split with a comma, right? Then I will get a stream of columns. Now I will convert using a map. What I get is a column name. For each column name, right, I will concatenate a semicolon with the column name. It's not column names, it's a column name. And finally I will collect everything by joining with a column. So this will return us a string like this, first underscore name and joined with a comma, so that is there, and last underscore name comma. So this is what we get, right? So this is what we need. So here I go back to our string, I will remove that, I will set column names, oh sorry, column values. This is the string I need. So okay, so we are good here. And let me check if we need to do anything. Okay, one final thing, right? We need to add one property, so that is this one. So this is a batch related property. We are saying that Spring Batch job enabled is false, means I don't want to Spring Boot to start our job. Instead I want to run our job, right? I want to run my job myself, so that I am doing with this. So because this annotation is there, Spring will try to run the job, and also we are going to run the job. So 2 times the job will be ran. That we don't want. We want to take control of our job execution ourselves. So that we are doing by telling Spring that and disable that feature. Okay, so that is done. Now I think we are good. I can run the application and I will see. Right, before that let me clean this table. Sorry, not that, empty tables. Okay, so let me start it. We are running it. Okay, there is one error here. Let's see what it is. So there is a null. Why? Column names is a null. Am I not passing that? Oh, okay, this is column names, not names. So let me put yes here. Okay, I want to make sure this is the same here. Yes, column names, that's what here it is. So that makes sense. Now let me run it again. Okay, job executed successfully. Let's go back to our table, refresh, and we got our data here. Good. So now in future, like if you want to run this application on airlines data, it is so simple. What I do is I will go back to our application, but still this here we need to do this change in our application and rerun, right? This is still not a correct approach for a production application, but at least we made it generic and everything is at single location. We need to improve this more, and I'm going to do that in the next video. So but I will tell that later, but let me do these changes here. I want to read airlines.csv and I want to insert this data into airline or table. Yes, airlines, and columns what I have in this table is month, male passengers and female passengers. Okay, now let's see, there is data. No, there is nothing here. Let me run this application again. Good, job executed successfully. Now go back, refresh, and we have our data in the table. So that's good. So this is running as expected. Let's go back to our checklist and let me do this. Yes, finally we did all the things in this checklist and we have our running application and it is executing the jobs successfully, right? So there are many ways to improve this project, like adding a REST endpoint or JMS or the file, or reading or listening to your file system. So in the next videos or maybe later, right, I will be working on this project to improve it and adding more features, maybe UI to it, adding a UI pages to UI screen for this application, so front end for this. So keep watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Hope you learned something from this video. So let's meet next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.